Hi, everyone. All right. Welcome back to this space that you all see me in every week. It's good to be with you all. So we are in week 11, and I'm going to jump into lecture soon. This week we're talking about performance art. I think a lot of you all will enjoy this week's topic. We will see. But before I jump into that, I did just want to do some reminders and also maybe some updates or additional information, just thinking about your final. Okay, so since we are in week 11, there are 15 weeks in the semester, so we're getting close. We're kind of heading downhill towards the end of the semester, and so your final is coming up. I hope you've all had a chance to look at the write-up for your final research project for this class. It is in the Google Drive. It's been linked in the Nest before, but it's also just like in the front page of Google Drive. You'll see a folder for it. So please make sure, if you haven't already, that you are familiarizing yourself with the final research project, and let me know if you have any questions. The sooner the better, and if there's any confusion or want any clarity, the sooner the better, because what's going to be happening with this semester, as you may already be noticing a little bit, the workload each week is going to start to decrease, which will allow you more time to work on this research assignment. So check that out. Make sure you're starting to really brainstorm and thinking deeply about who your case study artist is going to be. In a nutshell, for the final project, you will all be picking one artist, any artist of your choice, to be researching, and you'll all be creating a research-based presentation for the class, somewhat similar to what I do each week, where you will share your screen, show slides, tell us about this artist. But of course, as you'll see in the write-up, the artist that you choose, you want to be relating that artist's work, that artist's process, to at least two of the topics that we have covered in this class. Okay, so every week is a different topic, a different category, and so be thinking about which topics, which readings, which information from class that we have gone through, at least two of the weekly topics that you can really pull and compare and contrast your artists to in relationship to these art space and place topics. Okay, so just want to make sure that's on everyone's docket, and know that yes, we still will have some weekly work to do, but start to try to balance the weekly work, which will be less, with your research for your case study. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to jump in to week 11 lecture, which, as I said, is performance art. Okay, I do think, let me share my screen. I hope you all will. I think many of you, based on kind of just getting to know you all a bit through your feedback and your writings and your assignments, I think performance art is interesting to many of you. So there's a good chance a lot of you actually know a great deal about performance art at this point. If not, this is going to be kind of like every topic in this class. You could spend a semester on performance art, just like you could spend a semester on land art or any of the other things, right? So I'm going to do my best to make this kind of succinct and brief. And as you see in our first slide here, when you're thinking about performance art, the elements, the four kind of basic elements that people often describe as performative or performance art based is time, space, the body, so the performer's body or the presence of a body, and then the relationship of often that body to an audience. Okay, so those are the four kind of defining features of performance art. And as you see at the top of the slide here, it's saying, we're in that postmodern shifting period around the 60s and 70s. And that is in the art world kind of when performance art started to be defined. but you may be thinking to yourself like, oh, time, space, body, relationship to people, like those elements, we've seen that, right? We've seen that much earlier than the 60s. We've seen that, with Capro's work, for example. He's doing the happenings. We've seen that with Guy Debord's work. We've seen that, honestly, since the beginning of human, right? This idea of people thinking about time and space and their body. But so all that's true. I think, especially when we think about theater, performance art has been around much, much longer than the 1960s and 70s. But within the art world, similar to what we were talking about last week with the land art movement and environmental movement, there was a lot of new art going on. There were a lot of artists that were kind of experimenting with new forms of art, forms that often maybe outside of the gallery, outside of the museum, outside of their normal expectations. And also along with all these new forms of art in the postmodern period, there's also the need for new definitions of art. And so performance art in the art world was born around then, having to do with many artists who were, yes, working with their body and working with the relationship between their body, their space, and the audience around them. Okay. So I'm going to talk about two artists in this little lecture today, kind of, in my opinion, kind of maybe the bookends of performance art in terms of the past and where we are now. The first artist is Adrian Piper. Many of you may know her. She has been a very influential artist and also writer and theorist and researcher. Adrian Piper in the early 1970s started a piece we're going to look at here called the Catalysis series. And what was going on with Adrian Piper at the time, along with many other artists, is, as I was saying, she wants to, break out of the normal traditions of the art world and start experimenting with blurring some lines, right, between what's the space of the public and the space of the art realm. Kind of what's the space in between the public sphere, the person, the artist. And Adrian Piper kind of wanted to think about the merging of those within her own body. And so this slide kind of explains some of these early performances she did in the Catalysis series, and we'll look at them here. So here you see Adrian Piper. This is in New York City. She's walking on the street and she just has a sign, on her that says wet paint, walking through the streets and just watching and not only observing how people are responding to her. You can kind of see some of their reactions or moving away, but also, using her body as this point in the middle, this intersection of herself and art and the public. Okay, so she's inserting herself into this space, and she does lots of experimentation with how she can change her behavior, or maybe like change the norms of her behavior to see how it will play in public. So here you see her, she did part of the series was stuffing, tissues or rags in her mouth, walking around, seeing how people are responding. Here she is on the bus in New York, and you can see, one person is kind of giving her a side eye. The other person is completely ignoring her. So this is just her experimenting with this perhaps atypical or abnormal behavior. Clothing, of course, is also something we all kind of, clothing can, I definitely don't want to say define us, but it can definitely change how we visualize or view people. So here she is with gloves and eye mask on. It's almost kind of funny when I see this. I don't know why, but I instinctively think about the masks we all wear now. And of course that is normal now, but I imagine, of course in the past that wouldn't have necessarily been. And so you're seeing the responses in these images. This slide I'm looking at here, this is one of the very influential series and just characters that Adrian Piper created. So based on this catalysis series, where she's just really experimenting with different ways of behaving or acting or looking in public, Adrian Piper created this performance or this character called the Mythic Being. And so this is her here. You see her, of course, dressed up with glasses and a mustache. And you will see more about this in the Nest content this week, more about the Mythic Being character. But of course, another aspect that she was playing with within her experimentation was gender. What are the roles of gender? How can we take these concepts of gender, flip them, and exert that into public and see how the response is, right? So really often Adrian Piper is always questioning norms. What are norms? Where do they come from? And how can we push back against those norms, against the conventions, and with her body? So a lot of her work early on was this performance bodily based work where she would push back on conventions just with her presence and how she held herself. But of course, you want to be thinking about the relationship to space here, right? How is she inserting herself into spaces? How is she questioning boundaries? And how is she thinking about power dynamics and otherness and the audience? So remember, one of those elements we talked about at the beginning was also the responses and reaction relationship to the people. So in this slide, you can kind of start to see those relationships, how she and others are responding to her. And then in the Nest, yeah, you'll see a little bit more, a couple more videos about Adrian Piper's work and the impact it has on people and in public spaces. So that's Adrian Piper. These links you see here are in your Nest content, and I think you all, will enjoy. I'm a huge fan of Adrian Piper's work, so I hope you'll enjoy learning about some of her earlier. She's still, by the way, like a very prolific artist, critic, and writer. But I think it's nice to see kind of the formation of some of her early work. Okay, so that was Adrian Piper's work early in the 70s. Now we're going to jump. Okay, we're going to jump to almost current day, 2018. I'm going to go over a piece by E.J. Hill. And E.J. Hill is another performance artist that I've always been really impressed by and blown away by. And I got to see this work of his at the Hammer a couple years ago. It's called Excellencia Volitia Victoria, and that translates to from Latin to excellence, resilience, victory. And what I think is actually very unique and fascinating about E.J. Hill's work is that he is a performance artist, but almost beyond performance art. His work is very durational. So he is often defined as a durational artist, and he is absolutely always thinking about his body in relationship to spaces, but his work really tends to focus on kind of the duration or extent of time that someone can do something. And so, these prolonged periods of time. So the artwork I'm showing you from the Hammer that I was mentioning. So this was for the Made in LA gallery show at the Hammer in 2018. And this is E.J. Hill here. You see him kind of standing on this podium. And what was this artwork was really fascinating because it's multi-layered, and a lot of E.J. Hill's work is multi-layered. So first of all, I just want to start with saying that, so this show was up for over 3 months. I think about 3.5 months. And one part of the durational experience or performance durational experience for E.J. Hill is that every single moment that this exhibition was open at the Hammer, 6 days a week, from the opening of the gallery to the closing of the gallery, which is long hours, E.J. Hill stood here on this podium inside the gallery, still just like this, as you see in the image. I didn't take bathroom breaks, didn't sit down when people weren't in the room, just stood there still for, over 3 months, 6 days a week, which of course is like just a physically exhausting durational experience. And so that, and here I'll let you read the text. This was always behind him in the show, this text here. And so that was for the duration of the show. This is kind of just an overview of the room. That's the same pedestal that he was standing on. It just happens to be without him in it in this image. And what you're seeing on the walls over here also as another layer of this piece, these are actually the high schools and schools that E.J. Hill went to. So before he did this 3+ month long durational standing experience or performance here, he's E.J. Hill's from Los Angeles, and he decided he wanted to really think about the spaces that are built around us in the city, and in particular the spaces that he was a part of, the schools that he attended. And so for every school in Los Angeles that E.J. Hill attended, whether it's an elementary school, a preschool, a college, high school, any school he attended, he did laps around those schools for every year he attended those schools. And he called those victory laps, kind of as I am not the right person to fully know, but I think it was these laps were really about dealing with, like, thinking about the spaces he was in and using his body to kind of assert his presence there over and over, doing these laps and then having a victory over those spaces, right? And so I'll go back, just we can look at this moment. So it's a multi-durational thing. There's the process of his schooling, the process of him really thinking deeply about the spaces he's lived in, then him going and doing these physical laps around these spaces, and then taking all that energy, all that thinking, perhaps the meditation behind it, and going into the gallery and being still. And so that, to me, there's a lot of really beautiful layers of the bodily presence, not only in this space in the room, but throughout his entire career and how he's learned and the spaces that we all trust or don't trust, right? And so this week, these are some more videos on that piece. Actually, if you want to know more about this piece, you can go see the Hammer exhibition and learn more about that piece. But this week, for your reading, instead of a reading this week, I think that's the end of these slides, so I'll come back to you all. This week, instead of a reading, you all will be watching an art lecture by E.J. Hill, that same artist that I was just discussing. And it's a really powerful lecture. I think it's something you will all enjoy. And what E.J. Hill does, he goes back to one of his alma mater schools, speaking of schools, and just goes through the history of some of his performance work alongside some of the influential performance artists that he studied or looked up to. And so that will be, your reading this week, to watch that lecture by E.J. Hill. I think he's a really vulnerable and very open speaker. And so I hope you enjoy that alongside some of the other videos that are in the nest this week, to kind of, as I said, we're just kind of dipping our toe into performance art, but there is a lot of wealth and beauty and meaning within the form of performance art. And so I really hope you guys enjoy learning more about Adrian Piper and about E.J. Hill's work. And then, of course, start thinking about other performance artists, maybe in line or related in this idea, and in particular thinking about our bodies, right? Our bodies in spaces, and how other artists that whether they're your friends or just artists that you've followed, who use their body as a form of a performative artwork. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that. It is great to see you all, even though I never actually see you. Please do let me know if you end up having any questions about your final. Start thinking about artists that you're going to want to present to us all, and have a great week. Okay, thanks everyone. I look forward to your feedback on the EJ Hill lecture and the discussions this week. Talk to y'all later.